I think sometimes there's a lot of people when they start their own law firm, they tend to try to be very selective, which, you can do if you've already made a name for yourself and you're a heavy hitter somewhere and you're just leaving that firm. But when I was 31, 32 years old. I'd only been practicing plaintiff's law for like 4 or 5 years. Like, nobody was like, oh, I'm going to just send Darl this clear liability wrongful death case, with unlimited damages and unlimited insurance. You got to work up to that. And so I took a lot of not so great cases that I may not take right now, but I took it because I thought, you know what, I don't have anything else to do.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partners Podcast. I'm Jonathan Hawkins, your host, and we've got a special guest this week. We've got Darl Champion, who is a personal injury lawyer here in the Atlanta area. He's pretty active on social media and has some pretty strong opinions about certain things. So we're going to dive into that. Hopefully he shares that with us today. So Darl, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you, your firm, where you are, how many attorneys, staff, so we get a sense for how big it is.
Yeah, so I graduated from law school in 2007, went to Mercer, spent 2 years clerking for a federal judge down there, great experience, and then moved to Atlanta. Knew I wanted to be a plaintiff's attorney, which we'll get to and kind of how I started my firm, but knew I wanted to be a plaintiff's attorney, knew one day I would want to have my own law firm. But yeah, I took a job at a defense firm because you got to pay the bills when you're starting out. So I lasted 6 months before I got tired of billable hours and left to go work at a plaintiff's firm. So from there, went to Warshauer Law Group at the time. Now it's Warshauer, Woodward, and Atkins. Worked there for about 4 years. Did some products liability, premises, trucking, med mal, and started my own firm in 2014. So actually in about 2 weeks, we'll be celebrating our 10-year anniversary. And started with just me, no employees. And now I've got right at about 25 employees. I say right at about because there's some people coming and going. Like I've got one legal assistant that's going to be starting law school soon. I've got a new attorney starting, just had one leave. So, in that 25 ballpark is where we're at. We've got a legal nurse consultant. We've got a marketing team. I have 3 people on my marketing team, including one person who just does video and editing of video, which can actually come in handy too when you're getting ready for trial like I am. I've got an operations manager. I've got a firm administrator who also is essentially like a chief operating officer. 6 attorneys, 7 including myself, 7 paralegals, handful of legal assistants. So that's the one thing that I have learned is that you cannot have a law firm with just attorneys. The support staff are just as, if not more important.
That's right. And you mentioned people coming and going. We're going to dive into that, the joys of owning a business and people coming and going. But let's go back. So let's go back to the beginning. You said you knew you always wanted to start your firm. What was it? What was the impetus? What finally made you go do it? You're like, all right, I've always wanted to do it. And then one day you said, all right, today's the day. What was it?
So I was a partner at my old firm. I'd been a partner for about a year. I was what I would refer to as like a non-equity partner. And I would have probably left sooner had it not been for that. But, you make partner and you're like, oh yeah, I'm partner. I need to enjoy this for a little while. But, it really got to the point where I was starting to generate enough of my own cases. I was looking at kind of the financial side of things. I think our daughter was close to 2 years old at the time. And I just kind of took stock of everything. I'm like, if I don't do this now, I'm probably never going to do it. And I had one case I had originated, and it was like a clear liability, significant damages case. I knew it was going to be a policy limits case. And I said, you know what? Now would be a great time for me to take that case to leave because I originated that case. Clients, were referred to me directly. and use that money as kind of a nest egg to start my firm. And it wasn't like a significant amount of money. I mean, I want to say the fee ended up being like $60,000 or $70,000. But when you're looking at like, hey, like that can fund me for a long period of time. Did not have a lot of money in the bank. I think I had like $15,000 to $20,000 in the bank. I think I took out a loan on my car. My car was paid off. So I think I took out like a loan on that to get some extra cash. I got a credit line, which I did not realize that I could get a credit line. Like, who would lend me money? Like, why would you do that? So I got a credit line, like a $75,000 credit line to help with case expenses and that sort of thing. And, really, I want to say I made the decision in like April 2014, like mid-April. And then by like June 1, I was up and running.
Nice. Okay, so you had a 2-year-old daughter. You had some, but not much in terms of savings. You were able to get, some loans lined up. Did you have any, law school debt or any other debt that you had to worry about paying the bills on?
Yeah, I mean, mortgage on the house, student loan debt. Probably there might have been a little bit of credit card debt. I want to say I don't think I had any, but it was really just what am I going to do to pay my living expenses, and how am I going to support my family over the next, however long it takes to start getting more cases in the door. And you do kind of the rough calculation, and it's like, this can keep me afloat for a little while. And I just hope that other people will hire me and money will come in the door and I won't have to go look for a job somewhere else. But I think I even called my mom and dad and was like, if this doesn't work out, I'm moving back in with you guys.
Yeah. So you had one case. Did that resolve before you left and you used that as seed capital, or you took it with you realizing it would probably monetize?
That case, I want to say I'd originated like 3 or 4 others that I took with me, but they were not that size. I mean, they were like much, much smaller. And then when I went to go talk to my boss at the time and say, hey, look, I'm going to start my own firm. I had a plan for the cases. This is what I'd like to take. This is what I would propose on the fee splits. And they were like, well, hey, if you want to take these 5 or so additional cases that you've just been working on, they didn't really fit their criteria. I mean, they were smaller soft tissue car wreck cases. That wasn't really their business model. So I ended up actually with like 10 cases. And so from the time I made the decision to leave until the time I left, none of the cases resolved. But within, a few months of leaving, that's when cases started resolving, money started coming in the door. One of the things that I did was I was like, man, I got to join stuff. I got to like get out and network a lot more with non-lawyers. So I joined a Rotary Club. I joined the Smyrna Rotary Club. I was in that for a few years. I joined a BNI. I was at Business Networking International, I think it stands for. I joined one of those groups. I was in it for a year or two. And I did as much as I could to try to just meet people, because when that sort of safety net's gone and you're like, man, I'm burning all the ships, I've got to make this work, it causes you to do things that when you're comfortable, you wouldn't otherwise do.
I'll tell you for sure, when you got to pay the bills, you're going to do what it takes. So you started going out there, how long did it take for those efforts to start generating cases? I mean, and what did you find early on were the more effective marketing things you were doing?
So I can honestly say I never got a single case from the Rotary Club.
I was going to ask. Yeah.
Man, I mean, I think I was in it for like 3 years. I don't know if people in Rotary just aren't very litigious or what, but maybe they just don't get hurt as often. So no, I didn't get a single case from that. The BNI group was interesting. So I want to tell a little story about that that'll kind of jump from then to the future, or not the future, but from then until like 2020 timeframe. So I want to come back to that. But at least initially, what worked for me was really just cultivating relationships with other lawyers. So, there were certainly attorneys that I knew that had referred cases to my old firm that knew me from working on their cases. And so there were cases that they needed to refer out. They wanted to help me. And that's, a huge credit to them. I found very supportive people that started referring me cases and trusting me with them. Honestly, some of the initial ones are not the greatest. I think being willing to say yes helped a lot. I think sometimes there's a lot of people when they start their own law firm, they tend to try to be very selective, which, you can do if you've already made a name for yourself and you're a heavy hitter somewhere and you're just leaving that firm. But when I was 31, 32 years old. I'd only been practicing plaintiff's law for like 4 or 5 years. Like nobody was like, oh, I'm going to just send Darl this clear liability wrongful death case, with unlimited damages and unlimited insurance. You got to work up to that. And so I took a lot of not so great cases that I may not take right now. But I took it because I thought, you know what, I don't have anything else to do. I don't want to just be in my office twiddling my thumbs. But it allowed me to kind of get my foot in the door with a lot of places. About a year into starting my firm, I started getting referrals from an advertising firm here in Atlanta that is a higher volume practice, and they referred a lot of their litigation work out. I handled that. I did that for several years before sort of moving away from being sort of overly dependent on those litigation referrals and trying to become more self-sufficient. But I did want to tell a story about BNI. So BNI, if anybody listening has ever been to a BNI meeting, you got to get up. Most of them meet at like 7 a.m. You're getting up at the crack of dawn. You got to be there every single week. You got to do your little talk. And it's just very time consuming. And so I'm like looking around, all these people are passing business to each other because their industries fit. You've got like a realtor, a contractor, a plumber, like they just kind of work together. Well, there's no natural referral partner for a personal injury lawyer. It was just, hey, if this thing happens, and it just so happens somebody needs a personal injury lawyer, we'll refer you. But after about 4 or 5 months into it, one of the members approached me at the end of the meeting and said, hey, my daughter, and his daughter was an adult, she was like in her late 20s at the time. My daughter's had this lawyer for a dental malpractice case, and she hasn't heard from him in like 4 or 5 years. And so I'm like, that sounds strange. And instantly I'm thinking the 5-year rule. It's probably been dismissed because no order's been entered. But if you haven't heard from your lawyer in 3 or 4 or 5 years, like something bad's probably happened.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, I'll look into it. So I look into it. I end up, pursuing a case for them, got them a great result, ended up being sort of the family's attorney, handled a few soft tissue, smaller car wreck cases for them. They referred me to a few other people. Fast forward to 2019, that client with the legal malpractice case was leaving a bar I want to say it was in Calhoun, Georgia. And she got T-boned by a drunk driver, had to be life flighted to Grady, in ICU, like multiple broken bones head to toe, multiple surgeries, just astronomical damages. And I'm thinking, this is going to be a low limits case. It was like a 5-year-old F-150 that hit her. Turns out it was a company vehicle for a company out of Ohio, and they had $10 million in insurance. And I got every dollar of insurance. I got UN insurance. I got money from a dram shop case. So all in all, I think we recovered like $11.2 million in that case. That came from a BNI group. Now, here's the thing. That is not a repeatable, BNI to me is not a repeatable source of business. That was just totally a fluke. But I do think it shows the importance of being open to new cases. I didn't start my firm to be like a legal malpractice lawyer, but by taking that case and working on others with them, I developed that relationship with the family and got a huge case from it.
So that's interesting. I did a BNI group years ago, and I just remember similar thoughts you had. It's all these people. Like I remember in mine, there was somebody who sold prepaid legal services, and I was thinking, it was just sort of, there was a cleaning person, and I was just like, yeah, this is not going to be much for what I did at the time. And so, but it was a good experience. You get out there, you just meet people. I mean, you got to practice it anyway. But okay, so earlier you're getting out and meeting people. I'm sure you still do that now. What sorts of things do you do for marketing nowadays? Are you moved to the internet? Are you doing ads, or what kind of stuff are you doing?
Yeah, we do a ton of stuff, but we don't do any of your traditional media like TV, radio, billboards. We don't really spend a lot on paid ads online. I found it's just so expensive. We really focus on organic SEO. So we have a great SEO company that we work with, and just trying to get cases organically through that. We also have a fair number of client referrals. So we market to our clients. We do a monthly mailed newsletter. I'm a big Ben Glass fan. I've read Ben Glass's books even before I went to the plaintiff side, because I knew like one day I'm starting a firm, and he was just like speaking to me when I'm reading his books. And that was one of the first things I did, was started a monthly mailed newsletter to my clients. and just building that list and cultivating that list and adding people to that list. And so we also, have a lot of our clients follow us on social media so they can see the types of cases we handle, stay top of mind. We do email marketing with lawyers. The LinkedIn, I think providing informational content about legal updates and things like that is good. I've got season tickets to every Atlanta sports team. So that is a big source for me of taking other lawyers to events, concerts, sporting events, whatever, and just building those relationships. That's sort of like our whole marketing ecosystem in a nutshell. It's not a lot of lead generation type stuff. It's more of a kind of long-term brand building, brand awareness, that type of stuff, and relationships.
So let's talk print newsletter. So I'm in Great Legal Marketing now. So I know Ben, and I know they're big on that. And it's on my list of things to do. I just haven't done it yet. So let me ask, how many of those do you send out a month? Do you know?
Gosh, I would have to, it's got to be over 1,000 because we have over 1,000 former clients.
So you only send it to former clients. Do you send them to attorneys and
Well, current and former clients, we may have some attorneys on our list. I think it's primarily focused on current and former clients. I think, and by the way, for anybody listening, am I allowed to mention a vendor on here?
If you want to, sure.
Okay. So Newsletter Pros, we used them for a brief period of time. They were somebody that I want to say I found them through Great Legal Marketing, but we used them to create the monthly newsletter for a period of time. And that was helpful. Now we do it in-house in terms of the writing and the content and all that. But there was a time where we outsourced that. So for anybody who wants to do one, who doesn't have the time to do it, I think they did great work. They interview you once a month for 20 minutes. They ask you questions, and then they give you this newsletter that actually sounds like you wrote it. They are able to take the information you provided and put it in your own voice. So there are options, Jonathan.
Yeah. Part of it's too, it's just, there's different levels. You got the Cadillac version and maybe the lower version, the in-house version. But then it's I could come up with probably 1,000 names more than that in a minute. And I was talking to, I don't know if you know Marco Brown from LinkedIn. He's a family lawyer in Utah. I think he's got the biggest family law practice. His podcast, he was on the podcast a couple weeks ago. And I think he said he sends his print newsletter to every attorney in Utah. It's over 8,000. I'm just wow. I don't know. That's
impressive.
Yeah. So you could go big time with it, right?
Yeah, you could. I'm not ready to go that big. Yeah. Not ready to spam all the lawyers in Georgia.
Yeah. He said they complain. He says a lot of them complain. Why are you sending this to me? He's like, I'm still going to send it to you. All right. So we've talked a little bit about marketing. I came across something, I think it was on LinkedIn, and you said that you believe service delivery is more important than marketing. And I want to hear sort of what you mean by that.
Yeah, so I think especially on the personal injury side of things, there's this focus on just getting cases and not actually focusing on the cases you already have and doing a good job once you do get those cases. I'm not going to name any names, but there's firms in Atlanta where the attorney to staff ratio is just insane. There's so many staff per attorney, and the attorneys have just hundreds and hundreds of cases that there's no way they can adequately give their clients individual attention. And so I think service delivery is important for several reasons. One, I think you've got a professional obligation to do it. That is what you sign up to as a lawyer. You've got all your obligations and the rules of professional conduct. You've also got moral obligations and ethical obligations, professional obligations. But then you've got the sort of benefit that comes from being really good at something and getting great results. And so if you get great results and provide great service, that helps a ton with marketing. But if you are terrible as a lawyer, you can be spending whatever on Google ads. But if you've got bad Google reviews, they may not hire you. Or somebody else that gets referred to you may go and look at your Google reviews and be like, this guy's got a 2.5 star. Why am I going to hire them? So that's what I mean. Service delivery is so important. And that has to take priority over the marketing. The other thing that I see is a lot of lawyers get caught up in the chase where they're like, let's just get these cases in without any concept of how am I actually going to fill the leads? how am I going to do the infrastructure? How am I going to build the infrastructure for intake to screen the leads? And then, calls aren't being answered. You have unhappy potential clients who leave bad Google reviews. And it just creates this snowball effect where it can just really weigh down your whole practice. So that's what I mean when I talk about you got to take care of your service delivery and your delivery of legal services before you even get into the marketing side of things.
Well, your B&I story is sort of a exhibit A to that too. I mean,
so the flip side of that story that I always tell people is, one, I got that case by doing a great job, but the corollary of that is who didn't get that case, right? The person who didn't get that case was the person who abandoned the client, didn't do a great job. And so when you look at your clients as, I see this a lot, what is the value of this case to me? And then people don't give it as much attention because they want to focus over here on the higher value cases. They're shooting themselves in the foot, because when you look at it from a long-term view, again, started my firm, I was 32 years old. Hey, I might be doing this for 30 more years. I want to have people referring me. And so when you do a great job, you're going to get referrals.
And you never know where they're going to come from.
Never know.
And so, on the service delivery, to do that, you need good people. It cannot just be you. So I want to shift and talk a little bit about, hiring, attracting talent, that sort of thing. I know you talk a little bit about that as well. So, just generally speaking, sort of what's your attitude about bringing in good people? How do you do it? How do you find them? How do you screen them?
It's a great question. So this is a story filled with mistakes over 10 years, because I used to be of the mindset, hire based off resume. Who did they work for? Oh, they worked for this great plaintiff's attorney in Atlanta. They must be great. Not true. You've got to, and my current philosophy on this is culture and fit are way more important than experience and technical skills, because a lot of things can be trained. But if you have somebody, they could be a superstar employee from a result standpoint, but if they are poisoning the well and are not fitting within your overall culture, it's going to be a problem. And you see it more as you grow. So if it's just you and one person, well, yeah, hey, they're delivering great results, that's fine. But when you start to grow and you need people to kind of sit in the right seat on the bus and do the right things, but they want to go sit somewhere else and do something else and they're off doing their own thing, it creates problems. And so I'm a big believer in that, and just looking at their personality. Are they driven? Are they motivated? Do they have grit? Are they willing to put in the time? Are they internally driven? Like, do they actually care? Or do they view it just as a job where they're going to make money? And so where do I find people? So the number one, if somebody can solve the paralegal problem in the legal field, they will be a billionaire. Because everybody in every practice group I talk to, whether it's plaintiff, defense, big firm, whatever, can't find good paralegals. I hear it all the time. And I've run into that too when we've had to go through, hiring spells. But I will tell you, the one interesting thing that has happened from my LinkedIn post is I have people reach out to me. People I didn't even know that have been following my LinkedIn post in the background for a year or two. And they're like, hey, I really like your approach to things. I really like your way of doing business. I like the way, you approach handling personal injury cases. If you have an opening, I'd love to come work for you. We've hired several people like that, like really high performing A players. And that I haven't even had to put a job listing out sometimes.
That's awesome. I have heard a similar story from a couple other people. Just, people post on LinkedIn for different reasons, but recruiting, sort of the way you just described it, is, in my mind, a really big reason. If you're looking to grow, you say, hey, this is my philosophy. This is the way we do things. And eventually you'll sort of cultivate a following. And you say people reach out to you, but you could probably, you drop something that says, hey, we're looking, and then boom, you're going to get a ton of inquiries.
Yeah, no, and that was not my intended reason for ever posting on LinkedIn. I never thought that would happen. Never. And so it's been a pleasant side effect of it.
Real quick, thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. So you mentioned, a lot of the attributes you want in your employees and the culture fit. And so how do you, when you're doing the interview, and how do you figure that out? How do you test to see if they sort of have those attributes?
So it really depends on the position. So some interviews, I don't even interview the person. I have my staff, my operations director handle that, or somebody else will do it. And I may come in and stop by and just introduce myself. But if it's typically like a paralegal position or an attorney position, I'm definitely involved in that. And a lot of that just comes from talking to them, just having a conversation. Who are they? What are the things they like to do outside of the office? What are the things that motivate them? And I don't do like a personality test. I know there's people out there that recommend that and, we got to do this test and see how they fit in. And maybe there's some validity to that, but sometimes I just go with my gut reaction on it. And I kind of feel like the guy, in Dumb and Dumber, that scene where they're like, we don't pick up hitchhikers, but I'm going to go with my gut on this one. And it turns out to be the guy that is trying to kill them. But yeah, definitely you have some misses, but I feel like I have honed that in more over the last few years by making a lot of mistakes. There's definitely times where I interview people and I'm like, they say things or do things or have a way of carrying themselves that reminds me of a bad experience I've had in the past. And I'm like, that ain't going to work. They remind me of that person, not going to work. But, really it's about, part of it's, do they want to work here? Like, are they really wanting to be a part of our team and what we're trying to do? And the people that have that attitude end up being great employees. The people that are like, it's just a paycheck, that's where it becomes a problem.
Yeah, hiring it is a very difficult thing. But again, if you want to grow, if you want to have good client service, it's all about the people. So you found the person, they've come on your team. How do you keep them? How do you keep them from leaving?
Yeah, that's a great question. So people leave for a variety of reasons. Like I said, I've got a legal assistant who wants to go to law school. I had an attorney who after practicing law for a year and a half, decided she didn't really like practicing law. She wanted more of like an in-house job with an insurance company doing like claims examining type work, adjusting work. So those types of things you're never going to prevent. That's just going to happen. It's the nature of the evolution of people throughout their lives. But, I think having a good culture where people want to work, where people enjoy working together, certainly paying them well and ensuring that they've got good benefits. Like we pay 100% of our employees' health insurance. I like to think that that we pay well from a salary standpoint. We have a bonus structure as well. We try to do events outside, so I'll invite people if we've got, last year I did a suite for the Braves game, invited everybody and their spouses, doing it again this year. We've had dinners occasionally where, hey, let's do a firm dinner, invite everybody. Last year, so I have a suite at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Last year, I had all my female employees, got them a party bus and sent them down to the first night of Beyonce.
Oh, yeah.
So trying to just have like fun events outside of the office. I had tickets to Taylor Swift too, so I had a few employees go to that.
Oh, man.
One of them is the one that actually left though.
Hot ticket there. Hot ticket.
So that did not lead to her staying. But yeah, I really think it's got to be that. It's got to be they see a higher purpose in what they're doing. They like the people they work with, and they feel like are compensated well.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think the other thing you said before you went into that is things happen. People are going to leave for different reasons. You can't force somebody to stay forever. And I think part of it too is you just got to maybe not expect it, but not be surprised when it happens and be ready for it, because, growing again.
When I first started my firm, I think this gets into the importance of having like a process and systems and having people that are there to implement them so you don't have to do everything. Like it was very painful when I started out and people left, because then it meant I had to do a lot of stuff. I had to take over the case. I had to do these things. Now it's like, I've got other employees who can do that and who handle the case reassignments and do all that so that I can focus on what I need to focus on. Obviously, some of that depends on your size. The smaller you are, the more you're going to have to be hands-on, in doing some of that when people leave. But you can definitely have processes in place to help mitigate that collateral damage.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the other side of the coin is the underperformers, the cancers, whatever you want to call it, the people that you need to sort of get out of there. I hear from a lot of lawyers, it's not a fun conversation. And maybe it's not that they did something so egregious that you're like, you're out today, but it's just sort of this, everybody knows they need to go, but the lawyer just does not want to have that conversation. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, so the very first person I hired, I had to have this conversation pretty early on in my practice because I hired a paralegal off Craigslist for like $10 or $12 an hour, 3 weeks into my practice. And she lasted 3 weeks. She was late the first day. She was already interviewing for other jobs. She wasn't getting work done. And the first time I did it, I was so nervous. I'm like, man, but and I hate to say this, but each time you do it, it becomes easier because you realize the importance of what you're doing for the business as a whole. I think a couple points to make. One is nobody likes firing people. You shouldn't unless you're like a sociopath, right? I mean, but ultimately what you've got to get over is it's not fair to your high performers to have an underperformer, because here's what happens. When you have an underperformer, who's going to get dumped on? All the work's going to get assigned to the great employee who's getting stuff done. The reward for great work is more work. And so that person's going to get resentful. They're going to get burnt out. And so you've got to look at it from that standpoint of it's really not fair to everybody else to have dead weight. And the smaller you are, the more painful it is to have dead weight. Like if you're a 5-person firm as a whole and you've got one person that's not pulling their weight, that's way more painful than like a 25-person firm that has one person not pulling their weight. So I think you've got those people that are just not performing well. And then you've got like the cancers, the toxic people, the people that don't do what needs to be done. They won't do it. They refuse to listen. They complain all the time. They're just not a good fit. And those people too, you just got to rip the Band-Aid off and tell them, look, you're doing great work. You're just not a great fit for what we're trying to do here. A lot of times I give people the opportunity to find a job. Hey, I'll give you, opportunity to look somewhere else and find a job. But, I think, those people, they can't fit anywhere in your firm. If you have somebody who's underperforming, I do think you've got to ask yourself, is this a me problem? Is this, I didn't give them the right tools to succeed? I didn't train them enough. I didn't give them, enough experiences to get those skills. Are there other places in the firm where they might fit? But if you look at all that and you're like, man, they're just not going to work here. You've just got to do it. And again, it sucks, but you've got to look at the health of your organization as a whole and whether it's fair to other people. Because when your superstar employees see the C- players there and you've got an A+ employee, that will damage your culture probably just about as bad as a toxic employee will.
Yeah, to bring up Ben Glass again, I've heard him say more than once, it's like after you get rid of that employee, everybody else says, what took you so long?
Yep.
So that they,
it's funny too,
watching.
Because I'm like, why didn't y'all tell me? Yeah. Like it could have been sooner, but people don't, they don't want to speak. And I get it. Like you don't want to have a culture where people are like, hey, so-and-so's doing this. But, you do need a culture of honest reporting where people say, hey, look, I think a ton of sports analogies. So I always think of it, we talk about somebody who's a cancer in the locker room. So you have somebody, like I'm a Steelers fan. Antonio Brown, great wide receiver, but the guy's batshit crazy. Like he's just totally nuts, did a lot of crazy things. He wasn't a good fit. They had to get rid of him. You can have the equivalent of an Antonio Brown in your organization. They're putting up great stats. They're doing great things, but they are absolutely toxic and poisoning the well. If you have a strong locker room, a strong culture, you can more easily deal with those things. It is more likely that other people will speak up and try to get them in line. Hey, that's not the way we do things here. Again, you use the Atlanta Braves as a great example, right? Like that, hey, this is not the Atlanta Braves way. This is not the way we do things. You don't even need to go higher up to get that person involved. They just enforce it among themselves. And that to me is the importance of having that great culture.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. So shifting, another thing that you posted about fairly recently is about niching down in your practice. And, I'm on the niche down side of the thing, although that's not always the case. There are certain parts small town practice, you really can't do it.
It's impossible.
Yeah. And then even, and then maybe you want 2 or 3 instead of just 1. So what's your view and what's your take on sort of a niche practice?
So, I hope I didn't come across in my post to say I'm totally opposed to niching down. The intent was to say you don't have to. I think some people feel obligated. They're like, everybody's telling me I got to do this. I got to find something. So they end up drilling down, and the next thing you know, it's like they're only handling dog bites with German Shepherds in this particular part. And it's like, I saw a thing the other day for a guy who does nothing but FedEx truck cases. He's in another state, but that's it. Like, he took the niche of personal injury to motor vehicle to trucking to FedEx. And it's like, look, if that's what you're passionate about, great, but don't feel the obligation to do it. I think a great example of somebody who I have a ton of respect for, who has a niche practice and does it the right way, is Joe Freed. Excellent lawyer, great person, but Joe is passionate about safety. He's passionate about safety for truck drivers, and he just loves it. I think, and you can see this now because a lot of people hold themselves out as truck wreck lawyers, I think some people might do it for the money. And I think when you're looking at a niche as, hey, this is just going to be a way for me to make money, you're not going to be passionate about it. If you're not passionate about it, you're not going to put in the hours and get through those hard times to do it. You're also probably going to get bored because you're not passionate about it. And I just think it's a recipe for dissatisfaction. For me personally, we handle a variety of cases. We've got med mal, premises, products liability, car wreck, truck wreck. I handled an accounting malpractice claim like 3 years ago,
Oh, wow.
4 years ago or something.
Wow.
I've had legal malpractice. So we have a variety of cases, but I like it. I like that variety. If you told me tomorrow, hey, Darl, you're only doing nothing but medical malpractice cases, I would go do something else. Because I don't want to, I like medical malpractice cases. We have them, but I don't want to just do one thing. So that's my philosophy of niching, and my recommendation to people would be, if there's something that you feel naturally drawn to, whether it's within personal injury or some other area, do it. But don't feel the obligation to do it because you think that's the only way you can be successful.
And a couple things I would add to that is, don't do it too early in your career. You need a lot of variety to really see what's out there. And then the other thing I would say is, I've heard of people, sort of picking a niche that's a little too small. There's just not going to be enough work there. It's like, you may be the best and the only person in the world that does it, but there's only like 2 cases a year. So, that's another thing you got to be careful about. So I want to talk about another one of your LinkedIn posts. You talked about, I think early on, let's see, you shouldn't focus on money, but instead focus on sort of what you want to do and what you want to be in life, not what you want to buy materially in the next year or 2. Unpack that a little bit.
Sure. So I see this in 2 ways. I see this with people that want to start their firm but don't. I also see it a lot with people that want to be a plaintiff's lawyer and they never make the leap from the defense side because they don't want to take that cut in guaranteed pay, which is natural when you're in a contingency fee practice. You've got to do it. And so they're looking at, well, I may make less this year or next year or whatever. And I think that's the wrong way to be looking at things. I think you have to ask yourself and think more long-term, 3, 5, 10 years and longer. What kind of lawyer do I want to be? Because one day you will wake up and it will be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever down the road. And if you're stuck in a job making, you might have a great salary, but if you're stuck in a job you're not happy at, you're going to be miserable. And if you had made that leap 3, 5, 10 years plus earlier, you would probably be making significantly more money than where you're at the job that you're unhappy about. So you've got to make short-term sacrifices, whether it's starting your firm or switching to a different practice area, to get to where you want to be. And I see a lot of people, and I talk to a lot of people when we're trying to recruit people to come and work at our firm. That's kind of the sentiment I hear is, well, I'm making X and, your guaranteed base salary's only, X amount lower. It's like, that's just the nature of our business. If you want to be a plaintiff's lawyer, that's what you're going to have to deal with. But, I make multiples of what I would make if I had stayed at another firm because I made the leap. The first few years, probably not, at least not the first year, but there was definitely times where it sucked. And you're like, man, am I ever going to get another case? But over time, put in the work, the money will follow. And then you are also have become what you wanted to become.
Yeah, percent in that camp. I mean, number one, you need to do what you want to do. And, I'm a big, I call it optionality. And I tell a lot of younger lawyers, you want to live below your means. Don't go spend everything, because the more you spend your money and you get used to that lifestyle, you limit your options, and then you're stuck. Or at least you tell yourself you're stuck. You could probably still do it, but, early on, don't spend all the money. Don't go buy the nice car right out of law school. And then when the opportunity comes up, you can say, hey, I can take this leap and take the risk and get the multiple down the road, because, you've sort of planned your life that way. So that's huge. All right. So a couple other things. I'm not sure, I've talked to a lot of founding lawyers on this podcast so far. I'm not sure I've talked to anybody about owning their own building. Do you own your own building?
I do. So my buddy Drew Ashby, great plaintiff's lawyer in Atlanta. He's a 20% owner. I'm an 80% owner. We bought it together. We created an LLC and bought it back in 2020. And it's been a great decision.
Yeah. So,
and happy to talk about that.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, I hear both sides. I mean, I think owning real estate is, I don't want to own a high-rise office at this time of the world, but, owning real estate's great. One, I guess, counter argument I've heard is that if you keep growing, you might outgrow the building you buy. So I get that too. So
kind of been somewhat of an issue that we've had, but my counterpoint to that would be you can outgrow your lease too.
That's true.
And, to me, you have more flexibility as the owner than you do if you have a lease. Because you have a lease, you're subject to some landlord or some real estate investment trust that does not give a crap about you and is going to hold you to some draconian terms or make you pay a ton of money to build out to move to some other larger space in the building. And then you may outgrow that. To me, if there is a danger of outgrowing your space, you actually have more options as the owner, because guess what? You can sell the building. You can move out and lease it to somebody else. One of the things we're doing in our building right now, because we did not have enough physical offices for people, was we had 1,000 square feet of storage on our lower level. We're building that out into offices, and it's going to add about 5 offices here. So we also bought an additional building in Woodstock last year, and it's a small building. It's only 2,000 square feet, but it's a great investment. But here's what I would say about commercial real estate. One, your all-in cost with mortgage, taxes, operating expenses for utilities, all that is going to be significantly cheaper than what you were going to find in office space, period. Even at the current interest rates. Now, we did get a better interest rate in 2020, but we have an 11,000 square foot building. To get 11,000 square feet, let's say you're paying $30 a foot, you're looking at over $300,000 a year in rent. The air conditioner is going to cut off at 6 p.m. because they control the HVAC. It's not going to be on the weekends when you need to come in and work. You're going to have no control. You're going to be paying that much money. You could probably pay 2/3 of that. I want to say, our all-in costs are significant. I'll just put it this way. They're significantly less than that, our all-in costs, okay? Not only that, but I am paying myself rent. I'm building equity in an asset, and that asset is appreciating. So to me, it's I understand the people that just don't want the headache of building ownership. They're just hey, I don't want to have to worry about the alarm going off in the middle of the night. But if you can hire people who can handle that for you and do that, you don't have to worry about it. But from an economic perspective and a pure dollars and cents, to me, owning is absolutely the way to go if you can find a suitable office space.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's great. So there's something some people know this. I've talked to people from other parts of the country about you and this issue, and it's the mighty debate. So you're sort of famous for taking these guys on. So first of all, why don't you tell us what mighty was and sort of...
I don't even know what they are anymore because I haven't heard a peep from them since then.
I think they might have... You might have won the debate and killed them off. But so
I think the market decided that debate. So Mighty was and they're still around. And I think they're still trying to get cases, but they're also a vendor in the personal injury space. But they had this great idea that they were going to start a law firm that was going to handle cases for so much cheaper. It was like 30% instead of a third. So they're like, oh, you get a 10% savings. But these lawyers were not going to have any experience in personal injury. Some of them were not even, or the minimal experience in personal injury. They had no trial experience. They were in some far off state, some of them. And they just thought, hey, you just get some cases, you shuffle some papers around, and you get it. I think that is a perfect example of everybody trying to be like the next Uber. Oh, we're going to disrupt this industry. This industry is ripe for disruption. Well, no, it's not. Like at the end of the day, like you're representing people. It's a legal service. You can't just shuffle papers around and expect a big check to come. You've got to fight tooth and nail. You've got to be willing to file a lawsuit. You've got to be willing to take your case to trial. And when you create a business model that doesn't do that, to me, it was like the worst of both worlds, because you've now got a volume practice that has sort of the negative things that go about it, but no threat of and no leverage with insurance companies when you're not willing to pursue the case all the way. And they could not understand why I thought it was a problem. And, their whole thing was, well, this shows all these lawyers getting upset shows that we're right, that these lawyers are trying to protect their own. It's like, no, we're not. I'm trying to protect the clients. There might be lawyers that are worried about your fee and, that you're somehow going to undercut them and lower them, whatever. But I'm worried about all the clients that are going to get screwed over because you're misleading them, meaning you have no idea what you're doing. So I haven't heard from them in forever. I don't know where they're at. I don't know if that's going to be a thing, but I'm glad that I haven't heard much about them.
What's interesting, on that fee, to your point, just economically, the way I look at it, if you're a high volume practice, you're probably getting sort of the lower dollar cases. And if you have no threat of trial and you never take them to trial, a lot of low volume cases can survive because every now and then they get some big hits to sort of balance it out. But if you never get the big hit and you got to have this huge staff to run these cases, it's like you're never going to be able to turn the corner and make any money. It seems like, I don't know.
I think the one thing that clients don't understand, and we see this in Atlanta with like the 25% lawyer. Now there's a guy, have you seen the guy, the 20 is plenty lawyer?
I have not.
So it's like what clients don't understand, they just see that. They don't understand the difference between cost and value. And so if I, as a lawyer, let's say I get you $100,000, but I charge a third, you're getting $66,000 something dollars in your pocket. If that same lawyer gets you $50,000, but only charges 20%, you're only getting 40 in your pocket. And you probably had a very bad client experience along the way, did not get as much individual attention. You're one of many. I mean, all sorts of negative things that go along with it. So we try to focus on the value that we add, both from a economic standpoint that, hey, we're just going to be able to get you more money, and two, the client service standpoint. But the one thing when I had the debate with Mighty that they didn't understand is he's like, how can you get more money? Like, it's just filling out some papers. And I'm like, this shows that you have no idea what you're doing.
Yes.
So, yeah, that we could have a whole nother podcast episode about criticisms of the personal injury industry, but that to me was, I think they were a flash in the pan. I've not heard anything about them. And yeah.
Well, speaking of other issues in the personal injury space, something that's sort of made the news here in Georgia are these, I call them the runner lawsuits. Runners, it's been a problem. I'm sure you've seen it more than I have or know about it more than I do, but I've noticed it's been a problem forever. And of course, I'm not sure the state regulators aren't doing much about it. I guess it's a criminal statute, but prosecutors aren't doing anything about it. So somebody has filed at least 2 that I know of at this point. Any thoughts on that?
So yeah, the runner issue is a major problem in Georgia, and particularly the Atlanta metro area. To me, it's gotten worse. I know of clients who've been solicited, some of whom by law firms that are being sued in those runner lawsuits. And not only were they solicited by one or both of those law firms, sometimes they're like, hey, I had 10 different law firms call me, or 10 different people calling me, telling me. And it's so rampant and pervasive, and there's like no deterrent factor. It would be like the steroid era in baseball if you were like, hey, yeah, we know everybody's doing it, and we're not even testing for it, right? even if you're testing for it, some people are still going to do it. Like people still get caught now doing something, but you're at least deterring it and reducing the risk it'll happen. The problem that I see with the sort of enforcement mechanism is prosecutors, like that's not high on their priority list. I think there were some officers in DeKalb County that were prosecuted a few years ago for selling police reports, but it happens like everywhere. I had two clients in Clayton County, mother and son. They were in a wreck, hit by a DUI driver. The police report wasn't ready for like 10 days. It took a long time. But like 2 days after the wreck, no police report available. They get solicited by somebody who's offering them like $15,000 cash advances plus like $1,000 what they called signing bonuses. And it's just super egregious and nothing, the prosecutors aren't going to do anything about it. The state bar, I've tried to file complaints, I've tried to do stuff, but again, you deal with limited resources. I think some people don't understand what a problem it is and the problems that it causes. So maybe it doesn't get as much attention, but I do think that now it is starting to get more attention. I think that, these lawsuits hopefully are just the beginning. One thing I'd like to see is an express private right of action for lawyers or their clients that have been solicited to sue law firms that have solicited and to have some sort of statutory penalties for, this is statutory penalty plus fees. And you're going to have lawyers cracking down on it. It allows you to do discovery. The lawyer can build the case. They can then deliver that to the state bar. In a perfect world, you wouldn't need private enforcers, playing sheriff, but you have to in this scenario, I think, because nothing else is being done. I can't think of like a super efficient way for it to be done other than the state bar just to put more financial resources into addressing it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. It's a problem. Something needs to happen. A friend of mine was in a wreck many years ago. He was in the hospital. He's in his hospital room. And he gets a call to the phone that's in the hospital room, picks it up, and it's somebody trying to sign him up. And he's like, who are you? How do you even know I was in this room,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard it from people being solicited in hospital emergency rooms. I've heard of people being called while on their cell phone while they're in the ambulance.
Oh, my gosh.
It's gotten so aggressive and so pervasive that, and again, the more pervasive it gets, the more aggressive they get, because then you have the people competing against themselves. So hopefully, the lawsuits are bringing attention to it. I hope that there is some solution, whether it's the state bar, legislative solution, or both, to try and weed out some of this. Because, as lawyers, we do have to police our own. Because if you don't, somebody else is going to police you. And you're not going to like it when non-lawyers are the ones policing you.
Yeah.
So I would encourage lawyers to do a better job of policing our own and reporting things that you see that are clearly improper and try and get them addressed.
So shifting gears, you're coming up on your 10-year anniversary. You've had a lot of success, from just you to now, 5, 6 attorneys and pretty big staff. Looking forward to the next, 10, 20, 30 years. What's the vision for your firm? What do you see?
That's a great question. When you sent me the list of things we may discuss, I was like, man, this is a tough one. So, when I started my firm, I was in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you're literally thinking of like, what do I need to do this week, month, quarter, whatever. And there comes a point where you shift out of that and need to shift out of that survival mode and start thinking long term. I probably did it later than I should have in terms of being more intentional. But, I'm not somebody who has like revenue goals, or I'm like, hey, I want to hit X million dollars in revenue, or I want to have X number of employees. I just want to have a firm that gets great results for clients and provides great service. And that may be too simplistic for a business goal, but that really is my only goal, is to get great results, make clients happy, deliver great service. Because I do think a lot of what I see in the personal injury world is what I see in other industries like medicine. It's just everything being super commercialized, and everything being about the dollar. And, if we can be sort of the opposite of that, I think that will be our niche, right? I mean, you talk about a niche. Your niche doesn't have to be a practice area. Your niche could be, partly your brand. That, we're kind of the opposite of that. And that's one of the things that we try to do is be the opposite of what's going on. So, Obviously, I would love to have bigger and better cases. I think that's every personal injury lawyer's goal is, quality over quantity. And that's a natural evolution. I've certainly seen it over 10 years. The cases I get now are not, they're better than the cases I got 10 years ago, fortunately. So yeah, I mean, I would say continue getting bigger cases, doing a great job and making clients happy.
So I'm a lawyer. I'm out there. I'm thinking about starting my firm, or maybe I just started. I'm a few months in. What advice would you give them? You've got 10 years under your belt now. You said you've learned through making lots of mistakes. What's some advice you would give?
So I think for anybody thinking of starting their firm, before they've even actually launched it, I think they need to take stock of why do they want to start their own firm. Because I do see some people that start their own firm and they're just not motivated. It's just like a knee-jerk reaction. Maybe they're unhappy in their situation. You need to sit down and have a real talk with yourself and ask yourself why it is that you want to do it. For me, I just don't like working for other people. I like calling the shots. I like making the decisions. I like having control over the operations, case selection, everything. And that's just me. That's like always the way that I've been. I would not be considered a great employee if I worked somewhere. And there are people like that. But, if you get to that and you're like, hey, absolutely, I want to start my firm. I think recognizing that you've got both short-term survival mode. What are the things I need to do to survive short-term? Then what are the things that I need to be doing long-term? Sometimes people do put the long-term too early, like we were talking about earlier, niching down too early, or maybe being too selective too early. You can build your brand and build your niche or build, your case selection criteria while you're still doing things to survive, and then transition to that long-term thinking later. But I think the sooner that you can get into intentional mode, hey, this is what I want to do in 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 years and more, the better you're going to be. Again, for me, I was probably stuck in survival mode longer, and we had some good years. It wasn't that. It was just, I was programmed to think that way. I was just in that mode and I just never broke out of it until it may have been like 2019, 2020 with COVID, when things start to slow down and you're like, wow, what am I doing? What do I want to be when I grow up? What do I want to do? The sooner you can do that, the better. I think showing up every day, putting in the work, even on the days where you don't feel like it, even where you can't see the progress, you're making those sort of invisible gains that you can't see. Just keep at it. That's especially difficult in a plaintiff's practice because we're not sending out bills. You can have long periods of time where you're wondering, am I doing the right thing? Because the revenue's not coming in. And so, having your plan, sticking to your plan, and just every day doing the work, and you'll see the progress.
Well, Darl, that was great. And this has been fun for me. I think you've got a lot of cool things to say, a lot of interesting things to say. And I encourage people to go find you on LinkedIn, follow you, ring that bell so they get all your posts. But for those out there that want to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
Yeah, I love it when people reach out to me on LinkedIn. I have people send me messages, and we set up times to talk, do a Zoom, whatever. I just give them my experience. I don't fashion myself as like a business consultant. I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing at times, which I think is just, part of the growth process. But, most of what I'm giving is just, I'm not trying to sell something. It's just, this is what I've done. This is what I found does not work. There's a lot of things I've done that don't work. And here's what I found that does work. And I'm happy to share it with anybody. So look me up on LinkedIn. Happy to make a connection and message me that way. You can also email me, champ@thechampionfirm.com. Happy to set up a time to talk and give you my viewpoint on things.
I will say you've got a great name for a brand. You got that too, man. That's good.
Thank you. So my nickname's Champ. My dad's name is Darl. I'm Darl Jr. I never went by Darl until I got to law school. Because when I got to law school, I felt weird introducing myself as champion. So we've been trying to think of a way to integrate champion into some kind of personal injury slogan, but haven't found a way to do it that isn't super cheesy.
You might just have to go cheesy. You might just have to.
I may. A friend of mine sent me a text. He said, your slogan should be, why hire a chump when you can get the champ?
That's pretty good. Yeah,
a little cheesy for me, though. That's just not my thing. And so, I don't know. We'll see. You may see it one day. I'll come across my LinkedIn profile.
I'll be looking for it on a billboard somewhere.
Oh man. If you ever see me on a billboard, shoot me a message and say, Darl, what have you become? What was all this stuff we talked about?
It's the champ.
I will
baby.
say this before we go, and you can edit this out if you want or put it in some other part of the podcast. I have no criticisms of people that want to market on billboards. I have no criticism of people that choose a particular media. To me, it's all about messaging. Are you portraying yourself in a professional way? Are you being truthful with potential clients? It's the people that are giving us a bad name, that have cheesy ads that make it seem like this is a game, that the personal injury clients are just out for money and let's just get a big check. That's what I have a problem with. I think there's a lot of ways you can advertise through traditional media and do it honestly, ethically, and present yourself in a professional way.
Well, the good thing, there's so many different business models in the law. There's so many different ways to brand yourself, so many different ways to market yourself. And there's always going to be somebody in that space, but it also gives you the opportunity to be in the other space. So you almost want some of this. So you can be different, right?
You got to have your own voice. That's what I tell people, with LinkedIn, the only thing, I think a lot of people are afraid to take a position on things or to say things. It's like, what if I ruffle some feathers? If you do that, you're in like the cold center where you're not getting any attention, good or bad. I don't say things just for the sake of saying things or trying to get a reaction. But if you are willing to let people know who you are and what you stand for and how you view things, good things will happen. People, whether it's referral sources, potential clients, will gravitate towards you and flock towards you. And then you'll find yourself aligned with people that have similar viewpoints. And it's a great feeling.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, Darl, I appreciate you coming on, and this has been fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.yourlawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.